Hey, welcome. It's we're back. It's Wednesday. It's me, April Sabral, host of The Positive Effect, and I bring amazing retail leaders on every week to have awesome conversations about their careers because I truly believe that the positive effect of a leader on people and an organization cannot be underestimated. And I've had a very long career in retail and I have an amazing retail network. And so I love bringing on my friends so that we can have these conversations about leadership, retail, and so much more. And so today, I'm so excited. I've got Manny Maciel on the show for a good 30 minutes. I'm going to pick your brain. So welcome.
Thank you very much, April. It's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Thank you.
And we got you out of you're always like shy being on camera. So I'm so happy that we got you out here because when I posted this
Thank you.
yesterday, people were posting that they were excited to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump right in. We've got about 30 minutes. And our audience, is anybody that works in retail that wants to grow their career in retail. So really this conversation is to get out as much from you about your career in retail and what you're doing now. We'll talk about that later on. But really to get your words of wisdom because you've had a really great retail career. I met you a couple of years ago, right before COVID, and I sat with you for a couple of hours, and I was just like, "Oh man, I wish we'd known each other when we were both working in retail, but we know each other now." So, if you want to start off, Manny, just tell us your story, and don't feel like I'm talking too much. Tell us everything, like tell us from how you got into retail, tell us your career trajectory, because people that join us really love to hear that because it's inspiring for them. Some people are in a store position and want to grow beyond that. And so they just love hearing from leaders that we bring onto the show. And before actually, one thing I forgot to say this. So if you're joining the chat, just put where you're coming from. I can see a couple of you joining already from New Jersey and Toronto. So just put where you're coming from, and then we'll go back and respond to the chat after the show. But yeah, you just want to start off and tell us your story.
Very good. So thank you very much once again, and hello to everyone. My story actually starts very early on when it comes to the love and the passion for retail, and actually started in the Azores, in the island of Santa Maria, Portugal. And my father was a retailer, and he had a hardware store. And I remember being 6, 7 years old and being mesmerized by the actions of my father as a retailer, as a true retailer. And I used to sit there and watch him in the prep to opening his store and how the store was going to meet the customer. The sales process, the engaging process. So that stuck with me for a very, very long time. And when I was old enough to work, and I was at 16, I wanted to get on the sales floor. And once I got on the sales floor and caught the bug, that passionate bug of engaging and helping others through your passion, I knew that I wanted to further my education, but I knew that eventually I wanted to wind up in retail. So I went to a U.S. school on a soccer scholarship. I got a teaching degree, but never taught in a school setting. Uh,
Wow.
my teaching, for the next 40 years was done on the floor.
Yeah.
So although I was a certified teacher, it was not to teach in schools, it was to teach in retail. And then my story unfolds from there. When I got out of university, I started my own business. And it was a little downtown store in Cambridge, 700 square feet.
I did not
And
know that.
yes, and you're going to laugh, but it was called Mr. Hollywood. And the reason it was called Mr. Hollywood, I used to be my nickname on the soccer field with my teammates.
Why am
So,
I not surprised?
so that became the name of my store, and I ran that business for about 4 years, and where I got the opportunity to wear all the hats, from selling to buying to visual presentation, the whole gamut. At one point, I sold the store, and actually, my brother, who now is the senior VP at Harry Rosen, worked in that store,
Oh, wow.
and that's how he started his retail career. And I moved on to a company by the name of Dilex. And I'm not sure if you remember the company
I
Dilex.
do, I do. I worked with a lot of people actually in Canada when I first got there that worked at Dialect and talked about what a great experience it was at the time. Unfortunately, I missed that era, but I hear a lot about it.
And it was a phenomenal training ground for young, passionate people who loved retail. And it was called Big Steel. And so I started on the ground floor. And for me, that's very important. If you want to be successful, if you want to go the distance, uh, don't get caught up on where you start.
Mm.
Be focused on where you're going to end. And so I started on the sales floor and worked my way up to store manager to junior area supervisor to regional, and just loved every step of the way because I learned the business from the grassroots. And the lesson there was, be humble. And although I had my own business and I had done buying and everything, have the humility to learn, relearn, and unlearn. And I had to do
Oh,
all that.
that's so
Yeah.
good. I mean, you owned your own business and then you went back to the shop floor to work your way up. I think that's a huge insight for people to take away.
Yes. And with the eye on my career, I always wanted to get many experiences, not only in the product, but the type of business. So I was with Big Steel was a lower end price point. So my next step was to elevate my knowledge, and I went to Harry Rosen. So I was a regional manager that then went to be a store manager, but I was managing the flagship store at Yorkdale before Bloor Street was there, and that was an amazing experience with an iconic retailer and an iconic leader in Mr. Rosen. And I have some unbelievable memories, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to have worked with him. And I remember Saturday mornings at 7:30 in the morning, he would make his regular visit to Yorkdale, coffee in hand. He was debonair in the way that he dressed. And the first thing that he would say to me was, Manny, how was trade?
I love it.
Not how was business, how was trade? And
Wow.
and then he would say, Manny, I'd like to do a tour of the windows because it was all about detail. It was all about presentation. It was all about taste level. And we'd go from window to window to window where I would show my vision on why I put it together. And he would give me his eye on what was working and what was not working. And I feel very fortunate that I got that, what I call FaceTime with Mr. Rosen. And then we'd walk into the store, he'd take a walk around the store, and he had this unbelievable sharp eye for the details. And the stories looked amazing inside the store. But before he left, he'd go and look inside the showcase. And I'll never forget, we had these cufflinks in the velvet cover.
Yeah.
And he'd say, Manny, the store looks fabulous. But you know what? You've got dust in those cufflinks.
I love
And
it.
and it was just amazing. So those are some of the things that I really cherish, and they're very close to my heart.
Yeah.
The team that I had, top producers, top sales per square foot, and my lesson there was, yes, I was the leader, yes, I was the store leader, but it was really all about them
Right.
and how can I elevate their productivity, their potential, their knowledge.
Yeah.
And so
That's
from
really
here,
what I find really interesting, and I know we're going to go through the rest of your career, but you went from like low end to luxury almost, right? And a lot of people feel like they can't do that. They feel like they feel like they're stuck in the luxury lane and they're just in that kind of pigeonhole. Excuse me, or they're in a lower end. But what you're saying is you did your own business, you grew, and then you did like, a lower price point, and then you went to luxury. Why did you do that? Was it
I had the goal of eventually, in the latter part of my career, to own my own coaching business.
Right.
And if I was just pigeonholed with high end, I never would have understood the concept at Ikea, which was incredible. I never would have understood the off-price model, which was Winners and Homesense. I never would have understood Stars Men's Shop, which was an owner-operator that had 3 stores when I joined them. And at one point, we grew to 32 stores.
Right.
I never would have understood all the dynamics. I never would have learned what I did. I never would have been put in uncomfortable situations. And I'll give you an example. Being uncomfortable is where growth happens.
Yeah.
And every time I moved, I went from a high degree of confidence, and I had competence,
Yeah.
but the confidence lowered because it was new. I remember the first time at Winners when, I had a huge territory, over 200 stores, and they asked me, "Okay, we're going to go flex the floor," and I looked and I said, "Pardon? You're going to flex what?" He said, "Yeah, because now we ran out of oranges, and now we have to show apples. So how to move the store around, how to package everything." So I had to learn, and I had to
Right.
keep learning. But all that learning, today, there's a vast knowledge that I have that
Yeah.
I can share with others.
Yeah.
So
So you
I've
went.
talked.
So you went from Harry Rosen. Where did you go next? You went to Winners next.
Actually, I went to IKEA,
Okay.
okay, and then I went to Stars Menswear, and then I went to Winners.
Right. And you had
And
different roles, right? Because when I look at your resume, it's really unique because you ended up as a vice president of stores, right, at
yes,
Casablanca. So kind of same kind of trajectory of me from stores, but I always took in operations. For whatever reason, that's where I was comfortable. That's where I got recruited to. But when I look at your resume, you did different roles. You didn't, and maybe that's because you owned your own business in the beginning, so you had that knowledge and that experience. My confidence to take on other roles probably wasn't there. I worked cross-functionally with a lot of people, but yeah, you took on different roles throughout your career, and I find that really interesting.
and it really opened the door to the knowledge base. But the leaders that I met, a gentleman by the name of David Margolis. He was the original founder of Winners and Homesense. He was the one that hired me.
Mm.
Just amazing talent. And when I look back at their humility as leaders, but with this vast amount of competence, they knew so much, but when they talked with you, they flexed to your level, and that's so important as a leader. And they really worked on positional power, or personal power versus positional power.
Oh, explain that. I've never heard that before.
uh, Positional power is, listen to what I'm saying, because I am the leader, I am the boss, I've got a title to my name. The personal power is, what do you need from me? How can I support you? How can I elevate you? And so there was many leaders that I worked with, Mr. Rosen, Harry Strauss, who recently passed away, huge influence on my career. And his favorite line is, "Don't sell me anything. Make it easy for me to buy."
Oh, that is golden. Don't sell me
Yes,
anything. Make it easy for me to buy.
yes.
Mm.
And not only would he share that, but he showed me that to be an effective leader, it's hands-on, it's on the floor. So if you're going to teach someone, how to do it, show me.
Mm.
And many Saturdays I'd be on the floor with Mr. Strauss, and he'd show you the way it needed to be done.
That's huge.
Uh, so
Wow. So what's a pivotal moment? And I love this conversation. And can you remember like a real specific pivotal moment in your career that you can share with us? Because I love learning people's pivotal moments. They're all different to different people, but
the pivotal moment for me was when I moved away from fashion retail, and then was recognized by being the number one region in TJX, and we went from being the poorest functioning region to the best in a little bit over a year and a half. So
Wow.
KPIs, sales, retention. And for me, it was pivotal because I had to really rebuild. And it was pivotal for me because a good leader is only as good as the people that are supporting him or her.
Hmm.
And that was really the first moment that was so pivotal for me because we achieved something really of great magnitude, and it was
Yeah.
everyone in the organization. It was also important because we were number one because we made people feel important regardless of their position. So if you look at a winner store, who's the most important person in that store? Most people may say, well, it's the store manager, it's the leader. It's not. It's actually the shipper and receiver because they work in a matchbox and they get thousands of units that
Right.
come in every day.
Right.
And it's door to floor
Yeah.
in 24 hours. And if it doesn't get to the floor, you don't make sales.
Right.
So
100%.
it's really cool.
So when you went on to be, your role in Casablanca, right? When you were the vice president of stores, do you think all those experiences, how did they help you be, lead a group of stores like that?
All the experiences accumulated to me being able to see situations and recall my knowledge base. What did I do in that situation? Did it work? How do
Mm.
I have to modify it? How do I have to flex? So I had a bank of great experience that I could draw on. And I
Right.
think that really helps you, especially when you're taking on new roles, because you want to hit the ground running and you want to start delivering results very quickly. So that
Yeah.
really helped me.
Can you ever, was there ever like, so you said you have this knowledge bank, right? And in this knowledge bank of experiences, we always learn things that were successful, and then, excuse me, things that were just maybe not so successful, lessons we learned, or feedback we received. Was there any time that you had like those major lessons that you can maybe share? I know I didn't send you this question, but that you
Absolutely.
learned from.
I think my biggest lesson was in my leadership acumen evolved in the early years. You spend time telling, and I spent a lot of time where you're telling. And I think what happened to me when I drew into the bank was stop telling and start asking.
Right.
And when you talk about pivotal moments, when you start asking for input, when you start asking for opinion, everything changes. The other piece was that I learned was stop talking and start listening.
Yeah.
And I think the combination of those two elements served me really well as I grew in my positions.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I remember I had those moments when I was went from that telling to asking more questions. And I say to leaders now, like learn to ask really good questions. You think you're asking questions, but if you're doing 80% of the talking, you're probably not asking questions. And the more, if you're watching this and you're in a retail career and you want to grow, you can start practicing that now in whatever role that you're in, right? Learning to ask better questions and listen and like support your team. And also one thing I learned was my title went before me. You kind of said it in that positional power, and I realized that, people like working for me. So sometimes I would say things and I'm an inspiring leader like you are, and people are like, yeah, sign me up. And I'm like, hold on a second. My idea is not always the best. I might be really good at selling it to you and getting buy-in, but I don't want my title to cloud or to influence. I really want to hear from everybody. So it took me. I had to really work at that every day. I think when I got to that role, when I had that title, to actually realize and recognize that. And I speak to a lot of leaders about that now. And just because people agree with you doesn't mean to say that they agree with you. It might
That's
just be
right.
your title or your influence, could be, right?
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. So anyway, so how do you approach decision making as a leader? I remember when I was growing in my leadership roles and my decisions were getting bigger and bigger and having more impact. And I love this one because I think it's one of one of those insights that when you're growing in retail and you're growing in responsibility, you do have to make decisions. And, I just love to learn from leaders of how they approach their decision making.
It's a great question. And I think it takes time to be able to perfect the decision-making process. For me, when I make a decision, I have to look at two things first. I have to look at the time that I have. And is it a decision that I have to make immediately? That's going to have high impact. Or do I have time?
Mm.
If I have to make that decision immediately, I have to be prepared to make that call and have that confidence to make that call. If I have time, I don't like to be autocratic in my approach to decision making. I like to be consensus driven,
Mm.
and I like to ask. Hypothetically, if we were in this scenario, what would you do? Why would you do it? And then I like the sandwich of when you have clarity of purpose and you have clarity of expectation when you're going to make that decision. What's
Ooh,
the
clarity of
purpose?
purpose and clarity of expectation. I hope
Expectation.
anybody that's watching this is writing this down, because I am. I've
Yes,
always got a notepad next to me.
and
Clarity of
that really
purpose.
helped me. That
Mm.
that really helped me. Why are we doing it, and what do we want the end result to be, and then how are we going to do it?
I think that what you just said right there is, if you're listening to this and you're within a team and you're having to make decisions, just what you said right there, I would just write those down and ask that in a group meeting, and ask your team, why we're doing it and what's the end result and what's the purpose, because that's so powerful. And I think sometimes now in retail, things are moving so fast. I mean, back in the day when me and you were in the stores when we started off, there was foot traffic like crazy, right? And now there's so much more complexity. Leaders are dealing with so many different types of decisions, or it could be a decision to bring in like a new technology or something like that. And so I think thinking about your end goal and your purpose and I think that's really good. That's great advice. Really good
Thank
advice.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what do you wish you knew back then that you know now?
Phenomenal question. And my answer, I arrive at it very, very quickly. And I wish that some of the moves that I made weren't about compensation. And
Oh, explain that.
and because sometimes we're in a position and a company will come to you and it's a very lucrative offer. And sometimes the offer clouds the values, the fabric of that organization, the fit. And sometimes you bank on the compensation, but when you get there, within months, within weeks, you realize that the fit, the culture, the values of the organization don't synchronize with yours. And for me, the learning there was, if you get an offer of employment from a company, really do your homework. Really, take a look at the culture of the organization. Speak to people who have been successful there. Speak to people that have not been successful there. And they may be interviewing you, but do the due diligence to interview them to get those answers.
That's great advice. 100%. I think, yeah, and I think that's great advice, because I think, yeah, people want to move up and people want to have obviously compensation growth, and I think our industry could do a lot better job with the field leaders with their compensation. Um, but yeah, huge. And I think talking to people that have worked in the organization, good or bad, people that have left, people that have stayed, because everybody has their own perspective and understanding of it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how has your leadership evolved over time? And there's a lot of background noise. So I'm going to say stop messing with paper.
Okay. It's a really, really good question. For me, there's two areas where my leadership evolved. I went from transactional leadership to transformational. And the transactional is all about the business, the KPIs, the how the store looks, how, everything about the business. That became very natural, and it has to be done, and you do it. But my focus changed from, focusing so much on the the business because my people were taking care of the business, and I evolved to be a transformational leader. How can I inspire? How can I look at my team and the oil lights that are flashing on that dashboard? What are the behaviors that I have to modify, enhance, train? And I think once we move from transactional to transformational in nature, everything changes.
Mm.
And I believe there's a huge void today in our retail world because we have many people that are phenomenal at running the business, but then they have the void or the gap around how to inspire, how to be transformational. And I think it's good for you and I because I think we can do some great things with teams on how
Yeah.
to move from, the business transaction to transformation in the inspirational piece.
Yeah, I mean, that's our whole goal at Retail U is to provide resources for people to inspire their teams. Because I think people want to. In my experience, it's people don't necessarily have the tools and resources to know how to have those conversations or the leadership language. I know that when I became a John C. Maxwell coach about 7 years ago, and I actually started reading a lot more leadership books and just going through that process, it gave me language to speak differently with my team, not just about merchandising standards, like you said, or a walkthrough or operational directives and things like that. But it gave me, I mean, you've dropped so many golden nuggets of one
Thank
liner
you.
wisdom today.
Thank
And
you.
that comes though through experience, but also studying and reading and having that language. And I think, a lot of people go into retail just like we did, like just got a job when they were younger and worked their way through it. And so I think it's up to people working in the industry to then educate themselves on leadership and then be able to share that with their team. Because if you're a leader, your real goal is to develop more leaders, right? We
Oh,
need to
absolutely.
fuel that pipeline hugely.
It's interesting when I talk with people in retail. My ear is very in tune to the language that you're talking about, and what I'm talking about is the language of struggle when you ask somebody a question, and the language of achievement. And it's like learning a new language. If you're used to, the verbiage of the language of struggle, it sounds a certain way. The minute that the light bulb goes on and you change to the language of achievement, it's different.
Right,
And that's the impact.
right, 100%. Oh, I could talk to you all day, Manny. You're so inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we only have like a couple minutes left.
That went fast.
So, if you were gonna give advice to, a retail manager that finds this and, wants to grow in their career, see somebody like you, somebody like me, and they're like, I want to do that, or maybe they're like, I want to get out of retail, but then they watch this and they're like, oh, I'm re-inspired because that can happen too. What advice would you give them today to be successful?
Uh, Great question. I would say very, very quickly, don't be a thermometer, be a thermostat.
Ah,
And thermometers, they tell the temperature, that's all they do. The thermostat, if you ever saw a thermostat outside of the wall, it's got the little knob that regulates,
yeah.
and it's got two connectors. If those connectors are not joined, you'll never move the dial. So it's all about people connections. It's all about leadership. It's about influencing others. It's about giving. It's about supporting. That would be the advice that I would give, because without those elements, it's going to be very, very difficult to achieve success.
Oh, yeah, I love that. I've never heard that. That's coined now. Manny Maciel. Thermometer versus thermostat. Yeah, somebody in the chat just put, "Don't be a thermometer, be a thermostat." So look, this is going to go viral.
That's
I just
good.
know it. I love it. So good. And now you're coaching, right? You're actually doing
Yes,
coaching and helping leaders grow in businesses.
yes. It's what, the best role I think I've ever had, because I can take all of those experiences and the knowledge base and now implement it. And I'm learning so much. When you coach, I'm teaching, but man, I'm learning so much from the individuals that I'm coaching.
Yeah.
So it's great. I'm teaching, but I'm coaching at the same time. So it's great.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I'm so happy we got you on our show
Thank you.
today and got you out of hiding and put you on the screen, because you have so many words of wisdom to share. And I just look forward to, you know, oh, see, Kevin, yeah, Kevin, he said that was very valuable. So you can go back and read the comments
Thank you.
afterwards. But
Thank you.
you're an amazing, inspiring leader, and I'm so, so thrilled and so grateful that you took the time out of your day to join us. And I can't wait to see a Manny Maciel book one day.
I'm
Maybe.
going to need some help from you, because I loved your book and I go to it often. So thank you. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it so much.
And then one last thing, I'm going to do a plug. So Manny is walking 65 kilometers. That's right next week.
Yes.
And you're
Yes.
doing it's a charitable organization that you're raising money for.
Yes. It's the Sick Kids Foundation. We've raised over $32,000.
Amazing.
And I just can't wait to get out there and attack those 65K. It's for a good cause.
That's amazing. I know, I've been following you. I'm like, oh my Lord, 65K. Woo! That's a big
Thank
achievement.
you.
So congratulations on that. You're always
Thank you.
adding value to the communities and the lives of those you impact. So
Thank you so much.
you have a positive effect, Manny, wherever you go. So I'm just thrilled. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. So wrapping up this week's broadcast with Manny Maciel. If you see this in your feed, then share it, because these conversations are so golden, and we want to spread the word and spread these conversations as much as we can. So if you work in retail and you find it, share it with people in your retail network so that they can learn from my amazing, retail network like Manny Maciel. So
Thank
we'll see
you.
you next. Thank you. We'll
Thanks
see you
for
next week.
having me on. Thank you
You're
very much.
welcome. All
Okay.
right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.